You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Become a patron today at patreon.com/intotheportal. Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Brimming with rugged natural terrains of towering old-growth forests, glittering freshwater lakes, and endless trails into the unknown, which beckon those who wish to get closer to nature, and quite possibly some unknown creatures. However, there exists one story in particular from the 1970s that has since become part of the canon of monster lore. When a small inland lake, located on the southern tip of Vancouver Island, would become the site of a creature encounter the likes of which the region had never heard before. In 1972, the quaint recreation area of Thetis Lake would become the site of something that remains unsolved to this day. The sudden appearance of something monstrous emerging from the depths of the water stirred up both fear and speculation amongst locals, leading some to wonder whether the boundaries between man and fish could possibly become entangled. Join us on Into the Portal as we dive into the bizarre Canadian legend surrounding the monster of Thetis Lake.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm Amber Ray.
And I'm Andrew McKay.
And welcome, everybody. Good to be back. Good to...
Yeah.
Honestly, this is a fun one because we're going to our Canadian roots this week.
Not far from home, really.
Mm-hmm.
We got some family out on Vancouver Island, which is where this story takes us this evening.
Exactly. Right outside of Victoria, which is also the capital of BC.
Indeed.
If anyone is unaware of that.
Geography with Amber.
Well, a lot of people assume it's Vancouver.
True.
That is the biggest city center, I would imagine.
It's true.
In our neck of the woods. But anyways, Victoria.
Yeah.
And we've got a little bit of housekeeping. So we've got a couple new patrons. Really, really excited and
stoked.
We've
awesome.
So we've got Sticky Sound Zine and Jedge or Jose.
I mean, yeah, Jedge is how it came in. Jose was on the email. So thank you, Jose, and thank you, Sticky Sounds.
Jose. I just love that name. So anyways, I had to shout that out.
Absolutely.
And we do have our little packages. So our little goodies, the ITP collectibles, they're all on our way for the patrons. So we just want all of our patrons listening right now, let us know when you get them. Take some pics.
Hell yeah.
Have some fun. If you want to post it on our socials, that would be amazing.
That would be sweet. Yeah, tag us for sure.
Are we really
Twitter,
cool?
Instagram, whatever. Like we want to, yeah. I just hope hopefully they get there soon, and that you guys will be excited and it'll make your day because it's a fun little strange pack. I would say
it is. Yeah, we kind of went different this time because we've done pins in the past. We got in trouble with the post office over that one, so went a different direction for this. And for me, like, I was really excited because I got to include that new original design.
Yes.
So that Into the Portal UFO, it's all coming to the patrons.
Oh yeah.
And we are still humming on about doing a little fun contest of some sort. I think we're going to go a little more complicated than just doing a pick the number.
Oh, God, yeah, obviously.
Maybe if anyone has any suggestions, throw them our way, but we're still mulling that over.
We are. Yeah, no, open to suggestions.
Nothing too hard, though.
Yes.
Last but not least, we do have one more really exciting announcement. So we've actually made it to the voting round, the finalist round of our local Best of Kelowna.
Yeah.
So this is just like a business showcase kind of thing. And they've got different categories. Somehow we got nominated in the podcast category. So if anyone has some time, we're going to post the link in our show notes. And we're going to have it on our website, and we're blasting it across our socials, of course.
Definitely.
So if you catch wind of that anywhere, see it anywhere, we would really appreciate it if you guys went and voted for us. That would be really cool.
Oh, massively appreciated. And it doesn't take very long, just like your email or whatever, I think is all you need.
It's just a valid email.
It's just a whatever. But we'd really appreciate your guys' support.
Yeah, so whoever that was, thank you.
Definitely.
Let's get into it, though.
So like we said, this is really close to the capital of British Columbia, which is Victoria, B.C. Only 20 minutes away. So that means it's also only 20 minutes away, give or take, from the ocean itself. And that'll kind of play into a few of the ideas that we'll talk about later on. All of this happened in and around an area known as Thetis Lake, which is a popular spot for hiking and swimming and fishing, all that kind of stuff. It says boating as well in the official description, even though the lake itself is pretty small. You can walk around the whole thing in a day if you're really keen on. I think it's only maybe 10 or 15 kilometers to kind of round the whole lake. It's not super deep either, but really, really popular tourist destination. Actually, it was established as a regional conservation area, the very first in Canada ever, in 1958. The whole area of this sort of park, I guess you would call it, 831 hectares. So definitely could be possible location of other cryptid sightings as well. And I'm nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Sasquatch, obviously, because this is Vancouver Island on the west coast, the Pacific coast, right? 831 hectares is a big area as well, even though we're only dealing with a small body of water.
Interestingly, though, Andrew, did you come across the idea that there is a upper and lower Thetis Lake?
Yeah. It looked strange on the map. When I was just kind of like seeing how far is this exactly from the ocean and this, that, and the other. Overall, I mean, yeah, no, it's a weird kind of a shape, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
And it's like this upper and lower two freshwater lakes. So this is on a not a small island, small enough, sure. But yeah, no, so it's like connected by what they call a narrow culvert.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's only approximately just under, I think, 200 feet elevation, so not that high.
No,
or far away from the coastal plains.
Which is, I mean, I do. It's so funny because I have kind of a crazy idea for the end of this episode, and I'm already feeling your eyes burning into me when you're giving me that information, because that's just fuel to the fire, man. I love it. Mm-hmm. So the lake itself, Thetis Lake, it was named after a ship, the HMS Thetis, which is just throwback to the series we just did on the Franklin expedition, dealing with all of the HMS this and HMS that. Mm-hmm. And of course, Thetis is tied into Greek as well, same as Erebus, the space between, the afterlife, purgatory or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was like this weird, dark realm of just fear and anxiety and just primordial darkness or something.
And of course, they wanted it to exude that as the ship, and then it sort of had the reverse. Yes, indeed. I digress, though. The HMS Thetis, which, very much like those other ships, though, a 36-gun frigate, Royal Navy ship that was assigned to this area of the coast as a part of the Royal Navy's Pacific Squadron. But the word Thetis will come up for a very different reason a little bit later on. That's really interesting.
Interesting. Almost like a different meaning? Or
Yeah. I mean, not a different meaning per se, but ties in to some other very, very strange things we've covered in the past.
Interesting. Let me just say right off the bat, when we first broached this subject, and you referred to a Cryptonaut episode because they've covered this in their show.
Totally.
And you said it really offhandedly. And for anyone listening, and for just keep this in mind throughout the episode, it's like Thetis, like TH, not fetus, like an F. And I always get those two. It just sounds so similar to me. So,
and here's the irony of this. So anybody who's, I'm sure a lot of our listeners that are familiar with Cryptonaut, Rob, Chris, and Mark over there, those boys, they do an awesome job. But they actually gave us a shout out in their Thetis Lake episode because they were like, I wonder if those guys know how to pronounce this. And at the time I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it is Thetis Lake, not Thetis Lake. That sounds weird.
You know, both are bad because it's like Thetis reminds me of fetish, and then Thetis is fetus. I don't know.
Okay, well,
You're so good.
I have this definition later at the end. Maybe I should just give it now. I can't. It's got to tie into theories. I'm not going to do that now.
Okay.
Get those out of your head. Keep mythology in your head, or maybe some other things, not fetus and fetishes. Although I'm sure some people do have a creature fetishes, perhaps.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say a fetus fetish, and I was like,
no.
do not go there, please.
I was thinking mermaids, creatures, aquatic humanoids. I mean, there's some weird people out there, man. I don't know what people are into.
As you guys can tell, this is going to be a sillier episode.
Okay.
Almost like our version of the Scooby-Doo episode.
You know what? There's actually a lot of Scooby-Doo elements to this, like for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Let's get into this first sighting.
Cool.
Finally. Okay. It all happened on August 17th when two boys, 16-year-old Robin Fluellen and 17-year-old Gordon Pike, went to the local RCMP near Victoria, claiming to have been attacked by a monstrous aquatic creature while they were hanging around the beach near Thetis Lake. And it's a story that would become well known only a few days later, on August 22nd, 1972, when the Victoria Daily Times reported that two teenage boys were chased from the beach at Thetis Lake by an unknown aquatic beast. And I had to include this quote from Rob Morphy, who is such a talented writer and researcher, because as he put it in his article on the Thetis Lake monster, a voracious, razor-finned quasi-humanoid is what the boys encountered that day.
Oh, man.
Yikes. Definitely not what you'd be expecting on an inland lake on Vancouver Island, per se.
The razors, that immediately strikes me.
Yes.
That sounds dangerous.
Yeah. And I just want to say right off the bat, too, it's really important to remember for this story that before it became sort of this, I don't know if you would call it a flap, because there was only a few sightings. There wasn't a flap sightings-wise, but before it became like a public story in the area, it was legitimately reported to the RCMP. The boys went directly to the local RCMP and filed a report. And the attending officers fully believed their story. So specifically, Fluellen and Pike, getting into the story they relayed to the RCMP officers, they were hanging around the beach near Thetis Lake and specifically the recreational center on the North Shore when they both saw something very strange in the water. I don't know exactly what they were doing on the beach, but whatever they were doing, they were obviously not so enthralled with it that they didn't notice what else was going on around them. Yeah. And they saw something that looked kind of odd. It wasn't just a fish jump or anything like that. It appeared as to the two witnesses as if something was surfacing just off the shoreline that was much larger than any creatures that would normally be in the lake. It was described by the boys as a massive swelling of water that rose up with water cascading from the mysterious object as it emerged from the water at a high rate of speed. And then, all of a sudden, a monstrous, silver-scaled, fish-headed beast from the lake emerged. And as some have put it, there's some sort of differences in the exact description, but we'll get into it in a sec. But it essentially attacked them at a high rate of speed. Whether it started this attack in the water swimming, or if it was on shore like lickety-split and right after them, it's not exactly sure. But it hurriedly headed towards the two terrified teens. And within seconds, it was right on their heels. So they had no idea what to do, but obviously fearing for their lives, they ran straight for their car, which was parked right next to the recreation center at the north end of the lake. Couldn't have been more than a few hundred yards away.
So they're saying that this thing got out of the water.
Bipedally.
Okay.
So this is key. It ran after them.
Okay.
Creature emerges from the water and runs after them. Everyone absorb that for a minute.
Well, okay, let me just backtrack a little bit here, because in my mind, as soon as you describe this like massive swelling of water that's like moving at a high rate of speed towards the shore, kind of reminds me of almost like a torpedo. Also brings to mind that very infamous video that was taken, what was it called, the Folden film? Yep. With the Ogopogo in the Okanagan, where he filmed it from the highway from quite a distance, I would imagine. But it was like a massive, like a swelling of water, almost like a jet swelling. That's what I'm picturing in my head.
That's kind of what I'm picturing too. Or almost like, like any lake monster, like whether it's champ or anything, if you think of it just under the surface moving. Like, yeah, that's what I picture. It's just, it's clearly a living thing, but it's traveling. You wouldn't think it has legs initially. That's for sure.
At this point, we don't have an exact size, hey?
At this point, we don't have an exact size. They made sort of a judgment call after the fact, sort of collecting their thoughts, if you will.
Okay,
so let's digress here, and I'll get back into the story. So backpedaling just a tiny bit. The creature's swelling in the water, coming towards them at a high rate of speed, and then within seconds, the creature was on shore and chasing the two teens bipedally, as we've just said. They make it to their car a few hundred feet away, and luckily they reacted quick enough to get there in time because this thing was right behind them. And they could kind of make out what it was at this point, except for the fact they had nothing to reference it to other than this was just a bizarre humanoid monster that happened to be running on two legs. As one of the teens noticed, though, this mer being, as it lunged towards them, essentially had some sort of barbs or spines on it because he felt an intense pain on his hand as they slammed the car door and just ripped away. Speculation was made as to what exactly caused this wound, but realizing after the fact that he had this laceration, they went directly to the RCMP. And that's where the story continues and gets picked up by actual officers attending this case, if you want to call it that. So, very strange.
Of course, they were incredibly freaked out by this. This was not a regular occurrence for anyone relaxing on the beach. I don't care what you're doing. No one's expecting that to happen, okay?
Definitely not.
So, of course, I think it probably was more so the fact it was injury, but it was also the fact that they couldn't explain what had happened. So they decided to file a report with the RCMP. By all accounts, like you said before, Andrew, these officers believed that they were dealing with a credible account.
Yeah.
The boys themselves were in a state of panic, right?
Yes.
And they did have physical evidence to prove that something had happened. So if you're a police officer, the first thing is, you see a couple of boys, they're like 15, 16, 17 years old kind of thing.
Yeah.
Boys will be boys, right? What the heck were they doing over there anyway? But but clearly these were two serious enough teens that they were taken seriously. And like we said before, this cut, they weren't sure if it had come from the head of the creature or the hand.
Yes.
Because like we referred to, it was basically described as having these razor fins and also like barbs on its head and its arms and its legs.
Yeah, we haven't got into the full description quite yet, but we will in just a sec. It's definitely a gnarly thing that didn't have to do a whole lot to cut the hand of one of these, to cut the hand of one of these boys.
Almost reminds me of coral, hey, when you like touch coral and then you get that, yeah.
Definitely.
But whether or not this was an animal or not, or a man, it was pretty difficult to tell with this early description. It very much resembled something like the 1950s film, The Creature of the Black Lagoon.
Yes.
Which a lot of people will point to as influence for this specific creature.
Yeah, like we're obviously a couple decades off, but obviously still would have been in the zeitgeist of anyone interested in monsters or whatever.
Yes. And there is one other film that will play into this as well, and we'll get into that later on in explanations.
For sure.
However, getting back to description, so they went with about 5 feet. So this thing isn't massive, but it is human sized. And it is bipedal again, which is another humanoid characteristic. They kind of weighed in at approximately 120 pounds is what they were kind of approximating.
Guesstimation, I suppose, based on the height.
But the weirdest part was the epidermis. So the skin was described as consisting of solely silver fish-like scales. That is strange. The eyes were dark and bulbous, with a fish-like mouth, and allegedly these webbed hands, feet, and ears.
Webbed ears?
Webbed ears, yes. The creature itself did not have 5 fingers, but rather 3, and they were webbed. And along with that were these razor-sharp fins that are kind of like adorning, is almost like outer armor is kind of what I'm picturing in my head.
Oh, yeah.
Added to that was these barbed fins on the legs and arms. So that's a pretty gnarly beast. That's a weaponized creature, in my opinion.
It definitely has some similarities to, I'm already going to go there, I have some other references later on, but going back to our mermaid episode with Shay, it definitely harkens back to a little bit of the orang-utan and some of the Japanese soldier encounters where it was, different color, definitely different color. I believe that one was more pinkish. And then Shay had ideas about the pink dolphins that were rare in that area.
The freshwater dolphin.
Yeah. But it definitely had similar type scales, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And I don't know if it had the same gnarly barbs, but definitely the fish mouth.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Weird.
I mean, far away. We're a hell of a long way away from Indonesia, though.
Anyways,
So,
yeah. Before we get into,
digress.
You do digress. Let's just get into a little bit more of the description here because it just gets weirder and weirder. And let's dissect this. So the boys will go on to state that it was, quote, roughly triangular in shape, about 5 feet high and 5 feet across the base, end quote. That is weird to me. That does not describe something that's humanoid. I'm not seeing 2 feet in that description. So I'm not really sure what that meant. 5 feet high and 5 feet, but roughly triangular in shape. And the thing is, there are differentiating informations that are kind of swirling around on the internet. Mm-hmm. And some people refer to the triangular shape as referring to the head. And then other people refer to it as like just generally. So it's like, it's hard to picture something that is running bipedally on ground that is 5 foot across.
And you can't run with a fin.
And triangle shape.
Right? Exactly. And that's,
I don't know.
If this is a mer creature, as people would imagine with a solid fin appendage, it might be going at high speed in the water, but it ain't going to get out and chase you to the car if you're a real creature at all. So yeah, no, that's an odd description. So
it is. It was blackish and green in color, which is definitely reminds me of the creatures in Black Lagoon.
Yes,
and yeah, like they did reiterate that they're pretty specific about this one. They said it was. So the boy that had been cut, he was injured by, quote, 6 razor-sharp points on the monster's head. So they were pretty sure that it was the head of the creature and not a hand reaching out to grab them or something like that.
And 6 is very specific. Mm-hmm. I mean, unless they're just saying, it could have been 6. And like, that's just the quote that was taken by the RCMP.
Yeah, unless it's just like burned into your retinas because you're so afraid. It's like, that to me is, I can't even remember what, like the server I had yesterday or what, you know what I mean?
But the
like,
server isn't a quasi-humanoid chasing you to your car. You might remember the server if they don't have a name tag, but they are a mer being that's attacking you.
I guess.
I
don't know.
You might remember a couple more things about them.
Despite all the weirdness, the officers did state that the boys seemed sincere. And until they determined otherwise, they had no alternative but to continue the investigation. So there was actually like a search that was launched. Officers went out to the site of the lake as well as the vehicle parking spot. They could not find any evidence of an attack.
Yeah. Was
there blood on the ground? We're not sure. There was no reports to corroborate that.
No.
But despite the lack of results, the creature actually would appear again.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So this is where we get into the second encounter, which occurred approximately 4 days later. So this was mid-afternoon, about 3:30 p.m., August 23rd, and according to Unknown Victoria, which is the blog, it says here, a few days later, 2 more boys, 14-year-old Russell Van Nice and 12-year-old Mike Gold, said that they had seen a similar creature swimming in the lake, quote, shaped like a human body, but with a monster face and covered in scales. Mm-hmm. So, this is interesting. According to Exemplar, the boys said it, quote, came out of the water and looked around. Then it went back into the water. Then we ran. Its body was silver and shaped like an ordinary body, like a human being body. But it had a monster face, and it was all scaly, with a point sticking out of its head and great big ears and horrifying eyes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So we do get some consistencies. Humanoid, monstrous face, scaly. The difference here is 1 point sticking out of the head, not 6 points.
Yeah. The
eyes are similar, the horrifying eyes, even though, like, you know, that's pretty vague.
I mean, all monsters have horror. I mean, what monsters have cute, cuddly eyes? Be like, the body was terrifying, the head was full of spikes, and the eyes were so nice and soft and warm and welcome. The only rationalization I can make for the singular spike is that this thing was looking directly at them, and if it's almost like Mohawk style spikes, then it might look like it's one. And if the other 2 boys had sort of seen it at an angle, you could like make that call, almost like, you know, like a fish has like, you know, like the would be the dorsal fin or whatever is running, you know, along the body. So if you're facing it head on, you can see it.
I see what you're saying. So like or depending on your perspective,
yeah, it
could appear differently, right. Or they could have been less observant, or they were witnessing it from a distance. Another thing that I don't even know where I'm pulling this from, but I feel like it was a sci-fi movie we watched where basically, and I know this occurs in real life too with like lizards and things like that, where they have appendages on their head that they can inflate, so they can make just to scare things away.
Jurassic Park, man.
That's where I'm pulling that
Newman.
from. That's exactly where I'm pulling that from. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, so maybe it was just kind of flattened to the sides of the head, and it wasn't flared up because it wasn't actually ready to attack.
And that is total Creature from the Black Lagoon sort of aesthetic as well, with the sort of like he's got that kind of flapped out gill kind of look going on too.
Almost reminds me again of the that reoccurring character, like scaly lizard man in The Lost World.
Yes. For anyone who hasn't,
what's his name again? I can't remember.
I can't remember. It's the Lost World, 1999, 2000 TV series on Amazon Prime. That's all I'm going to say. Make your own judgments. Okay.
Have fun with it. Anyways, unlike the encounter of the previous week, these witnesses claimed that the creature merely rose out of the water, looked around, and then submerged again.
Yeah.
So the RCMP were alerted again, relaunched this search, but once again turned up nothing. However, the phenomena for both locals and the international monster community, it was really just ramping up and just getting started. So this thing has gone on to live in the imaginations of a lot of cryptozoologists and other researchers and enthusiasts. But
absolutely,
again, this isn't where it ended.
No, it wasn't. And I mean, the 70s was, I feel like every decade's got their monsters, right? But I think look at all the films that came out in the 70s, like monster movies, right? I mean, obviously 50s and 60s, there was a lot of alien sci-fi movies, and I think the 70s was moving more into like monsters a little bit.
And like reptilians and all that kind
of
thing.
Totally. I mean,
I can't think of any examples off the top of my head.
I can't either, but I know you got the Creature of Black Lagoon from the 50s, but I mean, I don't know if that would have influenced the boys necessarily, but we'll come back to that in a sec. What's really interesting, though, is that the creature itself really kind of became, it was in the popular consciousness, I guess you might say, after an article published by the Victoria Daily Times, where there was an artist rendition of the actual creature description. So a portrait, if you will, an official portrait of the monster. And we'll put that up on our socials and stuff like that. It's kind of a cute little picture, to be honest with you. It's not that foreboding like the actual story reads. But from there, the tales of the quote-unquote gill man would basically spread. And yeah, this went all around the globe. And this was actually, I don't have it included here, but I believe it was Japan specifically where this story really latched on. It was like super popular. Really? And there's lots of article prints of it or something along those lines. I'll have to double check that. But anyway, people were interested in this type of creature, that's for sure. And on August 26th, 1972, another local paper, The Province, received a phone call from a man who claimed to have lost his pet, Tegu Lizard, somewhere near Thetis Lake. This was a year previous, which was kind of interesting. He stated that his pet lizard can grow up to 3 feet in length and is indigenous to like very warm climates of Latin America, but he said it was lost by the lake, and he believed that it might be responsible for the monster sightings. So this again was, published by The Province and sort of like just kind of kept the fuel to the fire of the gill man possibly living in Thetis Lake. We haven't been using the term gill man, but I think I like
gill
that.
Man, merbeing. I like gill man better, I think, or silver scaled man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's interesting, though, the whole idea that an escaped pet might be responsible for this. I feel like we've heard that before, and it has been proven. Even there was that really unfortunate case over in, was it Nova Scotia, where it wasn't a lizard, it was like a pet anaconda, I think, and it ended up killing 2 young boys.
Oh, that's
from
right.
A pet shop.
That's right. I mean, I'm sure that happens weekly in Florida.
So that is kind of like a case. I can't remember what time of year that was. I'm not sure if it was summer or winter. Like, obviously, with cold-blooded creatures, though, they have limits. But we'll get into that.
They do. We will get into it. We've got some stats that might be interesting. But there was a gap in sightings, though. So this was in the 70s, and then we would have, at least in reported sightings, there was a little bit of a gap. And then we get into essentially, modern-ish sighting.
This one is interesting. So, of course, this comes decades and decades later, over 3 decades later, there was a man by the name of Jesse Martin who came forth with his own tale in 2006. So he claimed that he encountered the Thetis Lake monster in the summer while he was driving his car near the lake. So Jesse Martin, his story goes that after a day of fishing at Thetis Lake, he realized he had lost the sun, so he explained, and it was quitting time. However, by the time he decided to leave, the lake was mostly deserted, and his car was the last in the lot. As he approached his vehicle, Martin related how he thought he heard a rustling in the bushes, but he was trying not to think too much of it, so he just kind of got in his car. But as he was starting the car, he became aware of what he thought was a man running up to his vehicle.
Okay.
Pause.
A man.
A man. What he thought was a man. Because it's running towards him, it's bipedal, standing upright.
And that's what's so
Roughly human
scary,
size.
right? It's like your brain just goes to like a man is running towards me just because it's this figure of like 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head running towards you. But like it's weird. Okay, continue.
He wasn't too specific on why he got freaked out, if it was just the fact that he was being charged by an unknown humanoid. He didn't describe it as a humanoid, but essentially he got freaked out and he slammed the car into gear, peeled out of that lot, but he heard something slap against the passenger door. And so this is from Jesse Martin's words. This is cited from Cryptomundo. When I got to the place I was staying in Duncan, I pulled into the driveway and was about to go inside when I decided to take a look at the spot on my car where the man had struck it. As I walked towards it, I stared dumbfounded at what I saw. 5 scratch marks with patches of fish scales strewn without.
Interesting.
So he says 5 scratch marks. Earlier we had the description of 3 fingers. So I'm like kind of calling him out for that. I'm like, girl. Unless the fact was that there are these appendages, these razor fins, and then also, like we mentioned, those hooked barbs. So maybe those could be responsible for additional scratch marks.
I agree. I think like, almost like even how like cephalopods will have hooks along their different limbs and things like that and like stuff like that. I think that's correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, listeners, but yeah, if it's like a webbed 5-digit hand, there might be other things, on the arm, hand, parts of the body that could cause, the cut on the first reports of the kids in the first report, or maybe it's not like 5 digits per se, but it's just kind of like whatever else is on the appendage that's sharp, and it just ends up being 5 scratch marks. Unless he's literally means it looks like the perfect 5 fingers of like a devilish hand.
He never said it was 5 fingers. He said 5 scratch marks. So that's where I'm trying to give him a little bit of leeway.
Right.
I also have to say, though, the idea of fish scales being strewn throughout, is kind of absurd, because if anything, it would just be like a wet mark, in my opinion. Like, it wouldn't be like he's losing his skin. What is he, just like sloughing this stuff off? Just like a friggin'... Well, I guess if he's a lizard or reptile, then maybe he's losing his skin, like shedding it. You know what I mean?
I guess that's possible. I mean, like, why would it stick to the car though? Unless because it's the hand and it's like a single slap of the car on the the back of the car, and it was the passenger side door. The passenger side door. I don't know. Maybe this creature has it, like, it's sticky for a reason, like to grab onto things and stuff like that. So it's like whatever it touches it, and it does leave something behind. I don't know. I'm just tossing that out there.
I guess another thing too you could maybe consider is the fact that if it has these razor sharp appendages, it would have cut through the steel of the car or the aluminum or whatever the hell cars are made of these days, and that could have actually resulted in an injury with the creature. Ooh. He did not say anything about blood or anything. No, like guts, like or whatever else that.
Yeah.
But obviously you would think he would have some sort of blood. But anyways, I thought that was interesting. A lot of people are very incredulous to this account, which I feel like maybe I'm towing that line too.
I'm right there with you.
I have to say, though, an interesting thought is that all of these occurred in August. So we're talking summer. So if something like a reptilian humanoid thing is existing in Thetis Lake, perhaps it has cycles and it goes... it hibernates throughout the whole winter. late August. Maybe it's getting a little desperate and needs some extra fat before it goes into hibernation. So it's looking for some extra victims.
Possibly, hey?
But there's been no reports that I could see as far as any other missing hikers or missing swimmers or animal parts strewn around the sides of the lake that look like something had devoured it.
No,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's not like we're getting reports from, obviously it's a fishing recreation area from, say, fishermen that go out early morning or something. There's just like, floating corpses of fish strewn about or something like that or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's not a ton of evidence other than the eyewitness accounts. And
there's no layer that's been discovered.
There's no layer that's
Has there been
discovered.
Scuba divers going down and looking for this thing?
And that's just it. It's not a particularly deep lake or anything, right?
It's like 50 feet.
I mean, yeah, a little more maybe. It's not like we're dealing with Okanagan Lake, like a rift lake, like hundreds of feet, and then sediment and lava tubes and tunnels and crevices and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's a much more contained seeming environment, aside from the fact that it is adjacent to the ocean.
Very true.
Okay, there's one other thing too, because a lot of this account from Martin was actually pulled from Lauren Coleman's Cryptomundo article in 2012, and it was called 21st Century Sighting in Thetis Lake.
Okay.
So I thought this was interesting. So Lauren goes on to say that he had been in communication with Jesse Martin, and he had asked him what he says to debunkers that dismiss his report. And so Jesse reportedly replied, quote, "My response to the debunkers is simple. It's easy to deny the existence of something that doesn't fit into our concept of what is real and what isn't. It's difficult to come forward and admit you've actually had an encounter with an unknown creature, knowing you'll be in a position to be attacked," end quote. So that was kind of...
Yeah, and that's, it's a poignant thing to say. It's also just the sort of standard thing to say, whether you are a hoaxer or not. I mean, anyone can say that, and it's true. And that's the weird toeing the line with dealing with paranormal phenomena and monsters and all this kind of stuff. Because that's totally, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence is what that reminds me of too a little bit, right? It harkens back to that.
For me, it's kind of funny too, because Martin's account is more vague in the sense that he doesn't have this vivid description of the actual creature itself.
Yes.
From what he basically described it as a man running towards his vehicle, and he just peeled out. And He just didn't even want to figure out what was going on. For me, I kind of probably would have paused. I probably would be like, why the hell is someone running towards my car? Is there something wrong with my car? Am I about to drive away with all my shit on the top of it or something like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That'd be a classic Amber move.
I mean, it's also, like he said, though, he teed it up like I'm by myself, last one in the parking lot. Maybe it's kind of twilighty, maybe not the best visibility.
Why is someone else there when there's no other cars?
Right.
Again,
I mean, you're already
weird.
feeling kind of freaky walking to your car. Right? Like these other witnesses had the luxury of it being in the middle of the day. And of course, the second sighting from the other two boys comes into question a little bit when we continue on here, but their sighting didn't even have an attack. It didn't run towards them or anything. It was just sort of an observer, if you will, which was strange.
And the thing is too, with Martin, he was there all day.
Right.
He was there fishing all day and didn't have any weird things. It was just when he was leaving, which is kind of interesting.
And it's like, if this thing has a problem with people in the lake, it only seems to deal with it on shore. Like it never takes umbrage with fishermen being out there in their boats or anything like that, which is odd. So my brain is going a million miles a minute with weird potential theories right now. We've got a lot more to talk about, but before we do, we're going to take a quick break for our sponsor, BetterHelp.
Do you feel like there are things holding you back or getting in the way of your personal well-being? It's time to try BetterHelp.com. BetterHelp.com has licensed professional counselors who have a broad expertise in areas which may not be available locally.
You can connect to a licensed professional within 24 hours of signing up. And you can send messages to your counselor anytime. Call, text message, it's all up to you. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly phone or video sessions as well. BetterHelp is not a crisis line. It is licensed professional counseling with people specialized in depression, anxiety, relationships, sleeping, trauma, and so much more.
Better yet, it's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. We want you to start living a happier and healthier life today. As a listener, you get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/portal. That's BetterHelp, spelled BetterHelp betterhelp.com/portal to get your 10% off.
So why not get started today? That's betterhelp.com/portal.
There's a feeling we get when passing ghost stories around a fire, or sharing legends of fantastical beasts, both amazing and terrifying. The mere mention of the otherworldly beings that surround us are enough to make even the bravest amongst us shudder with fear. But these stories are as essential to our cultures as the languages we speak and the food we share. These fables of the unknown have become an integral part of our history and the foundation of our society today. And as frightening as these creatures might seem, we cannot help but wonder what they are and where they come from. Stories of the supernatural, whether of spirit or beast, will always find a home within our minds. For nothing haunts us more than that which we cannot explain. Hello, my name is MJ McAdams, part-time shadow person, full-time supernatural seeker. Welcome to Humble Hauntings, where the lovers of the unknown can pull up a seat and make themselves at home. I invite you to join me on a quest to explore the supernatural creatures that have bound themselves to our history and unveil the world's most heart-stopping haunts. Haunts that could be as close as your front door. Because after all, home is where the haunt is.
And we're back. Okay, so we're going to get into some theories and evidence, mostly theories because there isn't a ton of evidence. And I want to go back to, Amber's just laughing right off the bat. I want to go back to...
no evidence. Oh, well, I guess aside from the injury.
Aside from the injury, unless you believe it's self-inflicted and yada, yada, yada.
Or it was just boys being boys, right? And it was just an accident.
But it's like, why go to the cops? I don't know. Like, I don't know. I didn't grow up in the 70s. Maybe people were really, really bored. You know, maybe they did just want the attention.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's like, that seems like like, to me, if that happened to me and I'm 16, 17, the last place I'm going is the RCMP. Like, I'm going to any friend's house, like, I'm not going to the RCMP. It's different now.
I know. I probably wouldn't go to the cops either.
Right? But what's weird, though, evidence-wise, is like after that first sighting and encounter, the RCMP, they go out to investigate. We've got a laceration on the hand of one of the boys, and there's no blood. So, okay, fine. Maybe it hadn't, it happened really quick. He gets back in the car. There's no traces on the ground. But if they're hanging out on the beach itself when they were first chased, you'd think there'd be something in the sand. Like, you'd think there'd be something, whether it's really sandy or gravelly or whatever. There'd be some sort of a print. Unless it just happened to be that time of day where clearly they were there. Other people must have been too. They run away, chased away. No one else happens to see this happen. But then in the time between them reporting it, a couple people maybe walk over the rocks or whatever, because there was no prints discovered at this exact time. I did come across some reports a little later on of potentially some prints being found. I couldn't find any images of them.
I will say, though, this is a tree-lined lake. This isn't like a sandy beach,
No, I get it. But I mean, like, even if you step on a rocky... I mean, I don't know. It's 5 feet tall, 120 pounds. It's... Yeah, true. They're maybe not... Maybe and they're taking it seriously, but maybe not quite that seriously. They're not out there with the plaster cast looking for the Thetis Lake monster print to take, I guess. I don't know. But what's strange, though, is like the main theory people would keep coming back to seemed to be the report that came into the province a little later on, a few days later, which was the Tegu Lizard. So I don't know. Let's come back to that for just a second, because the prospect of something that we think doesn't have a chance of living, maybe, evolving and being, I don't know, not adapting, but just being like an enigma of the species.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, this is kind of interesting because we get to this weird intersection where it's a believable explanation in the sense that someone definitely could have lost a Tegu lizard, and those definitely are known to exist, and people do own them as pets, and they do grow up to 3 feet, not 5 feet, so that would be a bit of an exaggeration.
And that's tail too, right? 3-4 feet, that's with the tail, that's not standing up.
No, I know. There's a lot of... So that's where I'm... Okay, so you get the intersection of believability, but incredulity in the sense that this is not where this thing lives. They need heat lamps. They can't even survive without their little heat rocks and things like that in Canada. You know what I mean? Because this is from Argentina originally.
Right. I did see one... this isn't... I didn't dive deep, but apparently they hibernate in the winter in Argentina, kind of like how a frog, amphibians would, dig into the mud. They can survive through colder, but I mean, it's not necessarily the British Columbia winters.
No. Well, let me give some stats here because we've got some facts on the Tegus. So like we said, we alluded to, they're up to 4 feet. Up to 4 feet. And they are colored with black and white bands that go across their body. So it's not green. It's not like this black and green description that we had earlier.
And it's also not scaly.
True. Well, lizards are scaly. What are you talking about?
But it's not like fish scales, though.
No.
It's not scaly like that.
No.
Okay.
So they are invasive to Florida. However, they did originate in Argentina. So does the habitat fit was kind of my first question. Most of the time, tegus spend their time on land. They are often seen in roadsides, other disturbed areas. However, they can swim, and they may submerge themselves for long periods of time. A lot of people, that's what I kind of thought originally. I was like, well, it's a lizard. It's a dry animal. You know what I mean? It's not like a newt. But apparently they do spend time in water.
Okay.
They're mainly active during the day, so that kind of does make sense as far as the timing of these sightings. And like you alluded to, Andrew, they do spend the colder months of the year in burrow or undercover. So not exactly hibernating, but they do kind of protect themselves in their lower activity.
Gotcha.
In those months. So there was a local museum expert that weighed in on this from Vancouver Island, and they claimed it was highly unlikely that this thing could have survived for as long as it had been claimed to have survived, over a year. So that's a whole winter in this, in the coastal conditions of Canada.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's highly unlikely is kind of what they sort of surmised. However, there was one cryptozoology blog that referenced, like you said, that they do hibernate. So like we said, Argentina winters versus BC, I don't really know. But according to the city of Victoria, the city boasts an average daily high temperature of 7.6 degrees Celsius, which would be 45.7 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know why people use Fahrenheit, but anyways. And they have a daily average low of 1.5 degrees Celsius.
And this is in January, just to be specific here.
In the Canadian winter,
yeah. So it's it's not even, so 1.5 degrees, not even freezing. I mean, that's still really cold.
Did you pull up the stats for Argentina? No.
Nope.
No, you didn't.
Nope.
But I would imagine it's a lot balmier down there.
I mean, I'm sure they've got some nice ski hills and stuff in Argentina, but as far as near, I'm thinking it's a little brisk. For the Tegu to be the
the expert weighed in. The expert weighed in.
I'm agreeing with the expert.
We are not experts.
You don't need.
We don't need to weigh in.
Scathing eyes of Amber. That I wish. We really need to get this on YouTube live so people can see.
We've been considering
your reactions to things I say.
Oh my god!
Because it's priceless.
Oh no, nothing would be hidden then.
Oh
nothing at all.
You guys listening should just see it. Whenever I'm bringing up interdimensional stuff or. I mean, even some of the things I've said now.
Scully to your mold?
No, hey, everyone needs the Scully. I'm not saying you are, but that's definitely needed.
I think I entertain a lot more ideas that Scully wouldn't entertain.
Oh, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be co-hosting this show.
I get frustrated though sometimes with this. Anyways.
Oh, so you're saying not a weird enigma, branch of the Tegu. We're canceling that.
We're getting into a lot of complications here, right?
We're
getting into the idea: can Tegu lizards run like a man? Well, no, I don't think so.
And would they even attack at all?
Just look at these things. You can Google it. It's not. Anyways,
it's not scary.
The guy threw it out there. He had lost his Tegu. He wondered if it could be responsible. He kind of thought maybe it could, but it was just something that muddied the waters, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. For the very overactive imagination, perhaps you would look at that and see a gill man chasing you. I don't really know. I don't see that happening.
The only thing I can say that might support that is the idea of a triangular head with the fish sort of like mouth, because like lizards and fish kind of have similar mouths.
Right. I don't know. I think I'm kind of more into this next one we've got down here. There are some potentially indigenous creatures that tie into this as well. I mean, we can make our judgment calls here, but it's kind of strange. This creature, the Thetis Lake monster, in my mind, could be both. I mean, I always kind of seem to go this way, but an ethereal being, possibly something interdimensional, because it is just a tiny ass little lake. But there's also many creatures in indigenous lore that very much like that. They kind of seem to straddle the line between myth and reality. And we've talked about that with Sasquatch. We've talked about that with all kinds of different things. Thunderbirds, all kinds of different stuff. One of them is known as the Pugweese, or Pugwee, Pugwis. And there's a few other very similar creatures with similar spelt names that aren't associated with water, but this one is. And this creature, the Pugweese, I'm just going to say it. Correct me if I'm wrong, you guys. I didn't actually punch it into Google to see it phonetically pronounced. But this was not a very nice creature and tormented indigenous peoples of the Puget Sound region of Washington state for years. And it's been described by the peoples of Vancouver Island as almost like a skeletal, long-haired, sort of like underwater, bipedal wild creature, essentially, that you don't really want to mess with. It's even been associated with the idea of drownings and things like that. Here's an actual description I pulled up. The Pugweese, an anthropoid nature spirit living beneath the water, described as having Piscean face, gills, prominent but round facial features, round eyes, and in this case, 2 large beaver-like front teeth, as well as very well-defined eye sockets. So it doesn't necessarily include the spikes on the head or the exact description of the Thetis Lake monster, but this is obviously very, very close to home. This is the Pacific Northcoast and a bipedal aquatic humanoid creature, monster to some, perhaps, that kind of potentially crosses over. I don't know. What do you think of that?
I actually really like that idea. That's very interesting and kind of reminds me of the Ogopogo again, or Nahati. The idea that, yeah, this is coming from our home state, British Columbia. That's pretty cool. And the idea of it's an anthropoid nature spirit, very much like Ogopogo, has its origins living in, aquatic areas. And
exactly.
And the idea of it having this Piscean face, so a fish face.
Yes.
That is key.
Very much so.
Very key. And then again, the round eyes, these well-defined sockets, like that to me speaks to what these witnesses have described.
Totally, right? And it's like, again, ties in potentially to, I haven't actually brought this up yet, but we've mentioned it time and time again on the show, the notion of water being a source of like a conduit for a thinning of the veil or a crossing over potentially. I mean, water sources, whether rivers and river crossings, lakes, oceans, whatever, there's been seen as portals throughout history.
Yeah.
And, whether or not that's what's happening here, I don't really know. But I mean, it's whatever. We can come back to that in a sec. If you don't necessarily associate the indigenous creatures with the sighting of the Thetis Lake monster, I'm finally getting back around to the word Thetis again here with this next little part, because I have this sort of section titled here in our theories notes, Merman from Another World, because this harkens back to our mermaids episode a little bit. And we talked about the Nereids, or Nereids? Nereids, right. Thank you for correcting me. Sorry. I pronounced it the same way on that episode too. And
no, it was me saying that. I remember.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. And Shay, shout out to Shay.
I love Shay.
She's amazing.
She's great.
Thank you for that, Shay. But in that episode, we talked about these creatures, which are essentially, sea nymphs, if you will, in Greek mythology. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds. But what's really interesting is that Thetis is actually a figure in and of itself from Greek mythology, a sea goddess, and is associated with these, Amber, pronunciation again.
Nereids.
Right. And that seems odd to me. I mean, I know a lot of ships were named after Greek gods and Greek words and stuff like that, and that was the reason Thetis Lake was named after the HMS Thetis. I find it pretty serendipitous, or whatever you want to call it, that there's a sighting of a gill man or a mer creature at a inland Victoria Lake that has absolutely no ties to ancient Greek mythology other than the naming of a Royal Navy ship after a creature that very much resembles what was seen on the beach.
That is fascinating. I'm floored by that, to be honest. When you told me that, I was like, that is out of this world.
Very strange,
It's
right?
just a very weird coincidence, like beyond coincidence level, you know what I mean? And to me, because I've been listening to, oh man, since we've been out in the vineyard, I've been listening to so many more podcasts.
Totally.
And there was mention, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Hollow Sky. Those boys were talking about tulpas. And they were talking about the idea of a tulpa as basically a manifestation of thought and of energy, and how you can create a tulpa in your head. It's almost like a other self.
Sure.
But you can project that in certain ways. Like, I'm almost thinking almost similar to, there's an X-Files episode on it too. Maybe they did call it a tulpa. Maybe they call it something else. But basically the idea that you manifest what you believe, like not even believe so much, but what you're just thinking about.
Sure.
And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, what if someone like was doing their homework, loved Greek mythology, made that connection locally, and they were like, you know what I mean? Like, what if they dreamed this up themselves and then it became an entity beyond?
Like, they just became so enthralled with the idea of there being something in the lake, a spirit in the lake, like being tied to these former aquatic, mythological creatures. Yeah, okay. I can get down. I can get down with that.
It goes beyond the individual and it goes into the collective unconscious, or the cultural zeitgeist of the time, into the collective, so to speak. And it becomes something that other people start to pick up. And then once it's almost like a domino effect to a certain degree.
Sure. But, I mean, that's a good way of rationalizing it, because otherwise it's just oddly coincidental that there's a merman-like creature that emerges from a lake with the name that essentially describes it.
Yeah.
If you will.
Or it could even be more so like, oh my gosh, like the Jewish version was the Golem.
The Golem, yep.
The Golem or whatever. How it basically is the inscription. It's like the word placed in the mouth that breathes life into the entity, the being. So what if the very fact that it was just named that breathed life into it? And
100%.
I got my tinfoil hat on.
No, I'm loving that though, because even if you think of mythological creatures from the ancient past as interpretation, like the way they were written about, they were interpretations of, people maybe experiencing, interdimensional creatures the way people see a Sasquatch today. And it's like a spiritual experience for them or whatever, right? But because this lake was named this, and it's a water source, tying into all that sort of like very much paranormal stuff that always happens around water as well. That's where the reemergence of this would occur, and maybe provoked by exactly what you're talking about, by people that are like really into it, I guess you might say. It's funny because the word tulpas we've never really used, yet we've suggested exactly that like so many times. The idea of like manifesting reality.
Yeah. Manifesting through belief.
Yeah.
It's kind of hilarious we haven't done an episode on that.
I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's in the works.
And the only alternative to like that, I guess you might say, interdimensional or the tulpas or whatever, would be cryptozoological. And if you don't think it's something that lives or originated in the lake, well, Victoria and the ocean is only 20 minutes away. But is the suggestion there then that basically this, bipedal gill creature was kind of like maybe not having a time with his neighbors in the harbor off of Victoria, and thought, maybe he was fed up with Caddy and thought, I'm just going to go to a nice quiet cottage inland. I'm just going to mosey up 20 minutes to Thetis Lake. It's got some water. I'll be fine there. It just didn't last very long because the sightings stopped after 1972 until 2006.
He went into a deep sleep. What are these things come in 30-year cycles? So he was just a couple years off.
I feel like on that note is a perfect segue into the a notion of hoaxes, because we're being a little silly.
It is extraordinarily ridiculous, and it's one of those things where it's like it's almost.
But is it though?
It's almost hard not to believe just because of that. But
no, but here's the thing though. I want you to put this in perspective though. It's like, is it more ridiculous to you than like like a skunk ape sighting that doesn't have evidence. Like someone just says, I saw it. It freaked me out. I was out there hunting on the bayou and it freaked me out. I'm not going back.
Which bayou?
Whatever.
I guess it has to do with the history of the place.
It's the context of like, it's Victoria B.C. It's a gill man.
Yeah.
You know,
what other things were going on at the time? There was a piece written by a man named Daniel Loxton, who wrote for Junior Skeptic magazine on his theory that there was no monster at all. He actually referred to this movie called Monster from the Surf, or also called Beach Girls and the Monster, which is just, oh my lord.
Wow.
Yep. I gotta check that one out. It's probably just a masterpiece. But he noted that there is a gill man with a triangular shaped head in this film, and it was actually aired on a local television station 1 week prior to these reports. So again, there's no evidence to say that these boys were actually familiar, watched the show, or were even aware of it, though they did compare physical features to the creature from the Black Lagoon. So they already were making pop culture references themselves. They didn't refer to this though, which, you know,
right.
Maybe it would have just been felt too obvious. Maybe if you are going down that hoax line, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I suppose. I feel like I don't know, I guess people are inspired by what's going on at the time. Maybe they did see this TV special or whatever, but it's like, if you're going to hoax something, why go with the pop culture like that, unless it's just a joke? But it didn't seem that way at first. Like the first sighting just didn't seem that way. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pick the creature of the Black Lagoon to model this hoax off of, and then slash my hand open and go to the RCMP. Like, that's just weird. Mm-hmm. Weird way to spend your time.
It is kind of a strange way, and you like injure yourself and all this stuff. So you have to be kind of not disturbed, but you have to be pretty bored.
It's commitment, that's for sure.
I will say, though, that this report goes on, and Loxton actually did end up tracking down one of the boys that was involved in the second report. So not the first one with the injury, but just the second that was a sighting without any actual contact.
Right, second report. What were the names for those two boys again?
It was Gold and Van Nuys.
Right.
And they were a little bit younger than the first two. Mm-hmm. So now, at this point, this guy's 49 years old, and I'm pretty sure it was Gold that he was talking to. But essentially, Loxton described how he confessed that it was just a lie. And it was cooked up by his friend to get attention. So one confesses but places blame on the other. And, you know, it's just one of those classic scenarios where it's like, it probably was. Yeah, it probably was just to get attention because they...
Yeah.
I'm not going to say, though, like, that's definitive, because actually Lauren Coleman had another sort of idea.
Yeah, Coleman has made a few different remarks when it comes to hoaxes and stuff like that, and obviously thinks some are legit or whatever. Like, this makes sense to me, though. It's like the idea that a confession, like the confession given to Loxton from Van Nuys.
Oh, sorry. He was talking to Van Nuys about Gold.
That's right.
I got those confused.
Sorry,
yeah.
twist. It's all good. This confession received from Van Nuys, it's not necessarily an ultimate truth of the Thetis Lake monster, right? Because of two reasons in my mind. I mean, like, this is the quote from him, from Coleman. There's usually someone around who wants to tell whomever will listen that such and such an event was a hoax to get their 15 minutes of fame. You know, so it's almost like...
Oh, that's kind of weird. Oh, sorry, go on.
Well, you know, it is kind of weird the way you say that. It's like, obviously this guy's saying this years and years later. He's not looking for 15 minutes of fame. I think maybe that is a little bit not taken out of context, but clearly this is the second sighting. These were younger boys. They heard the first reports. It became popular because it got published and people were talking about it. And then everyone's hanging around Thetis Lake. It's a popular recreation area. They're going to say, I do think that the second report was most likely a hoax. The only other thing I can say about it is, like, this is so many years later. And even if you think you did see something, you're probably going to backpedal on that. Like, I'll give an example. When I was a kid, I swore I saw a pterodactyl at Christina Lake, out in the reeds at the marshy end. And, like, I was really young, went with some cousins. We thought we saw it. Later on, we're thinking back, it's like, that was a heron, right? We saw it spread its wings really wide. It looked spooky to us at the time. That's what it was.
Really? Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking that was, right? So I think maybe there's some backpedaling, but in a different situation, looking at a distance at something, you might just say, oh yeah, no, it was a hoax. Like he said, he just wanted to say it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they really did see something weird, but thinking about it so many years later, it's like, nah, we didn't see anything. Like, no, he was just blowing it out of proportion.
Yeah.
Even if there was something there that kind of gave them the spark, the idea to kind of like go with a hoax in the first place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I hear you. It's kind of funny going back to the quote from Coleman, though, like the idea that usually there's someone there who wants to tell so-and-so once this thing actually blows up, I guess is what he's referring to, but that it was a hoax just to get their 15 minutes. So like in my mind, I'm like, well, but even before that, they were saying something had happened to get attention, to get the 15 minutes. So it's like, then they're going to say the exact opposite to get another 15 or like, what's
no, I think we're
there?
just reading this wrong. I think it's just saying that like they'll say it was a hoax. Like they perpetrated the hoax to get their 15 minutes. Like that was the reason for it. And that's all.
See.
Almost
like the not the ghillie suit guy, but like that was proven, obviously.
Yeah.
But the others like came forth, and that was the Sasquatch video. Remember, there was like so many people that came forward, and they're like, "Oh, I was the guy in the suit." I was the guy in the suit.
For the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Patterson-Gimlin, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
all very odd.
It is.
I do have sort of like, I'm not going to say this is my ultimate theory at all. And I think I might be poaching this term from Rob Morphy. I don't think he referred to this in his article, but as referenced it before on their show, the idea of Aqua Squatch, or essentially a aquatic version of a Sasquatch-like creature.
It's not like a swamp squatch, but
sort of like on the spectrum of like skunk apes kind of living in the bogs and like, in wetland areas. And then you've got like the kind of like hardcore out in the woods, Pacific Northwest Sasquatch that maybe it can swim, but it's not usually sighted in water or anything like that.
Not obviously, but interestingly, there is the corroboration between Sasquatch sightings and high rainfall areas.
Yes.
They like a lot of moisture, a lot of cover.
They definitely do. And, okay, I want to be clear. Like, when he made reference to this, Rob Morphy on Cryptonaut, he wasn't subscribing to this idea by any means. He just made reference to it. But this idea of, there's been a lot of bipedal, aquatic, humanoid type things seen near, lakes and rivers and what have you. And then there's the idea of Sasquatch being an interdimensional creature. Could we be, and then the idea of water systems being portals and crossing points and these types of things. So I'm not drawing any hard lines here, but we see this across history, right? These ideas I've just said. Could this be associated with something like a Sasquatch? Like, could this be like almost the aquatic version, if you will? It's not a gill man. This is just where people's brains go because of like The Creature of the Black Lagoon, the TV special that you just referenced or whatever, and it's wet, it's coming out of the water. So you're not necessarily thinking it's a Sasquatch, but there's this idea that, like, obviously there's nothing living in the lake. Like, I don't think that there's a 5-foot-tall bipedal aquatic merman living in Thetis Lake. If it was a way bigger body of water that had estuaries to the ocean and all these kinds of things, we can talk. We can talk then about some different ideas. But I don't think anything picked up its bags and waltzed over from the ocean up the road to Thetis Lake and just parked there. So this thing's got to be coming from somewhere else.
What if he's a hitchhiker? He's going all over. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is like maybe a similar place from which they originate, right? The connection to me is like, the Pugweese and the Sasquatch are both referenced in indigenous oral traditions. And there's definitely a connection between the Pugweese and the Thetis Lake monster. They're not the same thing, but they're referred to in very similar terms. Like, creatures to be feared or whatever. And they're not necessarily there all the time, but they are very real. I don't know. I'm just tossing that out there. It's like, and I just loved the term Aqua Squatch. It just sounded so fun.
That's pretty cool.
So I don't know if there's actually any connection to Sasquatch there. The hardcore Sasquatch people are going to hate me for even saying that. It's all weird monsters, man.
It is. I'm just trying to imagine how someone would describe like gills, not gills. Gills, scales, and all this kind of stuff in replacement of actual hair that was just wet.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's the same creature. I'm saying that it's possibly coming from the same place, and that the way in which it travels is the same, and maybe related in some way. I mean, it's bipedal. We're looking at it as if, like, would we think we're related to that? We think that when we see Sasquatch, when people see it, it's this kind of like the uncanny.
Yeah.
Staring back at you. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. Smart. I mean, it's not lunging at you with barbs on its head. That's the other thing, too. Going back to that first sighting, it's weird that it would be the head that caused the laceration and not that it's reaching out to grab them.
I'm trying to imagine
It's just like diving Michael Phelps style head first, just like trying to spear them with its head. Like maybe that's how it hunts. I don't know.
Really? Yeah, with like the barbs, and then it's like already attached to its head, so
I
it
tell
can
you
just start
what,
eating.
You put a spike on Michael Phelps' head and put him in the lake. I bet you'll come up with some fish. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? What is your sort of, where are you at with the Thetis Lake monster?
I'm all over the map with this one. I don't know. I think it's a really fun story, and I would really just like to go to Thetis Lake and just like do some camping around there, maybe possibly, and just kind of like feel it out, see what's going on.
Hell yeah, definitely.
Because in my mind, I'm still unconvinced as to whether it's a hoax. I'm leaning towards the indigenous interpretation, the more of like a sort of a water spirit that manifests, and maybe these boys, because boys will be boys, right? Maybe they were like littering in the lake or doing something dumb that they shouldn't be doing. And then that's why this thing kind of manifested. In the case of the first 2, at least, like if the other 2 are going to chalk it up to a hoax, even though they did not agree. The other one never came forth with that. So it was just the one guy that was saying it.
Which is sketchy to me.
Yeah, it's all just very wobbly.
Well, I don't think the first part's wobbly.
No, I know. I'm talking about the second.
The second one, yeah. Yeah. Wobbly. Well, we want to hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah, we do.
So hit us up into the portal mailbox at gmail.com if you don't feel like leaving a public comment, but we love getting comments on our Facebook page and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, come follow us if you guys don't already. Instagram, we're at Into the Portal Podcast. On Twitter, we're at Into the Portal 1. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and our producer, Tim.
Yeah.
You guys are amazing. And thank you to our new patrons that have just joined us here. $1 will get you a shout out on the show and some custom stickers and obviously our undying love. So go and check us out. $5 will get you a shout out on the show. Even more ITP, custom strangeness, and obviously a whole bunch of bonus audio. And $10 gets you even more goodies and more audio. So much cool stuff. So hop on over to patreon.com/intotheportal and check us out. Also, don't forget to check out our sponsors, BetterHelp.com, as well as Audible.com. There's links below for both of them. And with Audible.com, you can sign up for free trial, and we get a little bit of a kickback from that. It allows us to kind of keep doing the show, and you guys get a free audiobook to keep. No matter what, you can opt out at any time. It doesn't cost you anything, and everybody wins. So check out the Audible.com free trial link below.
Last message, I guess. Patrons, we've got that new trivia episode that's going to be coming out really, really soon. And also some other strangeness as well. Yeah, so it's going to be a fun month coming forward here. And thanks just everyone for being so awesome, so supportive, and patient too.
Definitely.
And I'm just really excited to see when those mail outs start making their way over. Because,
hell yeah,
that was hilarious, Gay. I'll just say, we were dropping them in our mailbox. And I just I had this big bag full of them. I was just putting them in. Just in the car. Like, are you serious? You're still putting them in there?
We were thinking to ourselves, like, are they just going to not? Like, is this going to be like, there's too many of the same package here. Like, we can't do this.
Is this called snail mail spam or something?
Snail mail spam.
Anyways, I was pretty stoked on it all.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So hit us up when you guys get that. And thank you all so much for listening. Until next time on Into the Portal.
Your gateway to the bizarre.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.